questions orales, oral questions. L'honorable.
The Honourable House Leader for the Opposition. Madam Speaker, yesterday the House saw a very rare but very important moment. The House found the Public Health Agency guilty of failing to hand over documents related to the events at the Winnipeg laboratory and ordered the agency to table the documents. We know that on 3 occasions, the Prime Minister disregarded the orders of the House. On Monday, the Prime Minister can choose either to respect our laws and regulations or flout them. What will he do?
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And, you know, again, on this side of the House, we will not play partisan games with national security. In fact, the Leader of the Opposition yesterday, in his announcement to pull out of NSI COP, was roundly criticized by a number of security experts, including, for example, Steve Saidman, Patterson Chair of the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs. He said the Leader of the Opposition is earning this low level of support with his move of pulling out of NSI COP. Oversight? Why bother when we can grandstand?
The Honourable Opposition House Leader. Madam Speaker, it's precisely because we care about national security that we want to know what's happened. And that's why we want to know the truth. So why did the agency grant the highest security clearance possible to a researcher with ties to the Chinese military? Why did they give this security clearance to 2 researchers who were then escorted out by the RCMP? Madam Speaker, we want clear answers. And those answers aren't written on a t-shirt. The answers need to be given by the government. What will the Prime Minister do on Monday? Will he table the documents? The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize, Madam Speaker, let me respond again with some of the criticism that we heard from the national security expert community yesterday after the announcement of the Leader of the Opposition's decision to pull out of NSI COP. Listen to Stephanie Carvin, Associate Professor at Carleton University. She said this bulldozer approach to national security is misguided, it's dangerous, and it will result in a less transparent system overall. What does the Conservative Party want? A transparent, safe system for Canadians or partisan gain?
The Honourable Opposition House Leader. Well, I can't believe that she's saying this with a smile, Madam Speaker. The reality is that Canadians need to be reassured here. Now, parliamentarians who are duly elected here know that she needs to respect the House's the rules of the House. This is an order of the House. The government needs to respect that order. 3 times the Prime Minister refused to do so. Monday is the moment of truth. Will the Prime Minister respect the House of Commons? Yes or no? The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, as we have said, those documents were fully provided in an unredacted manner to NSI COP, the appropriate committee of parliamentarians to review security documents of this nature. And let's hear what Thomas Juneau, Associate Professor at the University of Ottawa, said. He said, in regards to the opposition's choice to pull out of NSI COP, this is a big setback for the parliamentary oversight of intelligence in Canada and more broadly for efforts to improve transparency and accountability. That speaks for itself, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member Calgary Nose Hill.
The role of Parliament is to hold the government to account. The National Microbiology Lab saw a significant security issue happen earlier this year, and Parliament needs to determine what happened so that it doesn't happen again. In order to do that, we need to see the documents that are related to this incident, and there have been numerous orders for the government to provide it to Parliament, not to a different committee that is not an official parliamentary committee. Will the Minister of Health comply with the House order and send Ian Stewart here with the documents on Monday?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, that member knows full well that the unredacted documents are with NSI COP, fully unredacted for appropriate review that protects national security. Let's hear more from Thomas Juneau, the Associate Professor at University of Ottawa, who said what is going on now is several steps above what is normal. The public criticism of NSI COP and the withdrawal of its members damages the confidence and the trust that are necessary to its operations. What a short-term play. Playing games with national security is never okay.
The honourable member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The minister is not accountable to Thomas Juneau. She is accountable to this place. Is not an official parliamentary committee, and it happens in secret. What's happening here is the government provided documents to that committee so that we couldn't look at it, so that we couldn't fix these issues on behalf of our constituents and the people of Canada, and that's wrong, and that's why this place is supreme. So I'll ask her one more time. Will she comply with the House order and send Ian Stewart here to be admonished with the documents per the motion that was passed yesterday?
Honourable Minister of Health.
You know, Madam Speaker, on this side, we'll never play games with Canadians' national security and privacy concerns. That's why we have a special committee, Madam Speaker, to review documents of this nature that are sensitive in nature. And if the member of the opposition doesn't believe me, let's listen to Steve Saidman, Patterson Chair of the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs. He said the question right now is why the Leader of Opposition is abandoning NSI COP. Its reviews thus far have raised important issues and serve as a basis of comparison for changes down the road. I think it's a short-term stance. Listen, we won't play short-term gains for partisan purposes.
The honourable member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, 3 days ago the government tabled a bill that was supposed to protect the French language. Now, just 3 days later, we've learned that Ottawa wants to appoint a unilingual English-speaking CEO to the Museum of History. This sends quite a message that the federal government is appointing a unilingual English-speaking person to be in charge of how Canada's history is told. The worst part is that we're not talking about a museum in Toronto or Calgary, but in Gatineau, Quebec. Does the minister realize the message that this sends? And will they back down? The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for her important question. Since I've been in office, and forever, in fact, we've always recognized how important it is to protect French in Quebec, yes, but also elsewhere in Canada. We also know how important it is to protect our official language minority communities. With the bill that we've tabled, we will continue to do this. And I hope that everyone in this House will support the bill. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, 3 days after the federal government made a big show of protecting French, we can see that nothing's changed on the ground. Radio Canada has revealed that in this job offer, mastery of both official languages would be preferable. Preferable, Madam Speaker. In a museum in Quebec, which serves a high number of Franco-Ontarians and which is supposed to hire employees who speak French. Mastery of French is not preferable, it's a must. After all the debates we've had this year about how French is declining, how is it possible that the federal government is still so negligent? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And once again, I want to thank my colleague for her important question. You know, a love for the French language is not something that the Bloc Québécois has a monopoly on. I've always worked in French. I will continue to do so. It's my language, it's my identity, and it's part of our history. We're all very proud of it. The bill tabled by the minister recognizes this. We're the first government to have acknowledged that French is in decline and that we need to be there to promote and protect it. That's what we're doing. And we are doing so within our jurisdiction. I hope that we will have everyone's support.
For Windsor West.
Land border communities and families have been reeling for more than a year as parents, brothers, sisters, loved ones, and even children have been torn apart by restrictions. We all want to keep everyone safe. That is the entire point of family reunification for family and businesses. But at every turn, the Liberals ignore input, fearmonger, and never offer solutions. What is worse is the elite exclusionism and the shroud of secrecy that creates anxiety and depression. The NDP proposed an inclusive safe border task force to find solutions and give stakeholders and public confidence. What is it going to take before the Liberals offer a plan to help Canadians through this ordeal?
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Oui, merci. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Last year, we set up important reciprocal obligations concerning the border in the interest of protecting public health. All of the decisions were based on evidence and the goal of protecting Canadians' health. We make sure that our border control agents have the most up-to-date information possible to make decisions quickly for any citizens who have to cross the border for essential reasons, and we will continue to monitor the situation as it continues to evolve, while of course always maintaining the priority of protecting Canadians' health.
North Island Power River.
Madam Speaker, Roy is a veteran with 9 years of service to our country. He left the military with an operational stress injury and applied to VAC for the remedy. But everything went wrong and it kept going wrong. Since 2012, this veteran has been trying to get help. Roy cannot sleep. He cannot hold a job. He's been traumatized by the very department that should be helping him. Roy's file requires a simple but meaningful fix, but his MP and the minister have failed him. Will his MP and the minister finally stand up for Roy, or will they continue to ignore him, hoping he will go away?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Minister, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ensuring that our veterans and their families have the mental health support they need is our absolute top priority. I have directed my department to demonstrate maximum flexibility in addressing the urgent mental health needs for veterans and their families. Budget 2021 provides $140 million to cover mental health costs for veterans while they are waiting for their disability benefits application to be processed. We understand the vital role families play in supporting our veterans, and we will continue to look at ways to provide the best possible support for our veterans and their families. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Madam Speaker, last night the majority of the House of Commons voted to censure the Minister of National Defence for his litany of failures. The most egregious thing he's been condemned for is allowing the crisis of sexual misconduct to fester in the military. Referring to the victims of military sexual trauma, Stephanie Carvin, Associate Professor at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs, said the minister failed utterly to protect them or ensure there's any kind of justice for them for over 6 years of being Defence Minister. Will the Prime Minister fire the Defence Minister today?
The Honourable Minister, Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, yesterday shows that the Conservatives are more focused on waging personal and partisan attacks than supporting the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces. As opposition members themselves admitted, that vote will do nothing to help our women and men in uniform, including those who've experienced misconduct. You know what would help the women and men in uniform? Supporting the nearly $250,000 in Budget 2021 committed to ending sexual misconduct and in the Canadian Armed Forces, but the opposition will not do that. While Conservatives play partisan games, we're focused on creating a lasting and positive culture change.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Madam Speaker, if she wants to really help victims of sexual misconduct in the military, she quit obstructing the National Defence Committee's work. There is a growing wave of consensus that the Minister of Defence is ill-suited to implement the changes needed to end sexual misconduct since he's already failed to protect our women and men in uniform. Military sexual assault survivor Stephanie Raymond said the Defence Minister has missed too many opportunities to act, and frankly, he too is part of the problem if he continues to camouflage or to be complicit by omission. The Minister basically, I think, should perhaps leave his functions, end quote. When will the Prime Minister do the right thing and show the Defence Minister the door?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives who, while under the Harper government, appointed a Chief of Defence Staff who was under active investigation by the Canadian Forces National Investigative Service. If Conservatives were serious about this issue, they would support Budget 2021 and the $236 million dedicated to combating and eradicating sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces. And as for the committee, Liberal members have asked 20 times for the committee to adjourn debates so we can move on to the reports, but the opposition has refused. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Madam Speaker, a scathing Toronto Star editorial said, one of the minor mysteries of Ottawa in the spring of 2021 is why on earth the Defence Minister is still Canada's Minister of National Defence. His credibility has been so thoroughly shredded by the sexual misconduct scandals paralyzing the Canadian Forces. Madam Speaker, sexual misconduct expert Megan McKenzie of Simon Fraser University said the Defence Minister has zero credibility on sexual misconduct. So the question is, why won't the Prime Minister fire his Minister of National Defence?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Defence is an inspirational trailblazer and ally who we are absolutely proud to have on our team. He has spent his career breaking down barriers to inclusion. The minister has lived a life of service to Canadians, whether that was during his time in the Canadian Armed Forces, member of the Vancouver Police Department, or now as a cabinet minister. This House and Canada are better for the service of the Minister of National Defence.
The honour member for Carleton.
Well, here we are in the magic million job month. June was supposed to be the month in which all of the pre-COVID jobs would be recovered, 1 million of them. In Chart 35, it's right there in the minister's budget that all the jobs would be restored this month. Yet we've lost 250,000 jobs in the last 2 months and have the second highest unemployment in the G7. So, will this month be as miraculous as the government claims? Will we have all of those million jobs back when the numbers come out next month?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'm glad for a change. It appears the honourable member is actually reading some of the government's budget. If he pays close attention to the same chart, he'll see another trend line on that graph that indicates the impact that job numbers would have felt without government supports. The very dangerous game of chicken that the Conservatives are engaging in to prevent supports from helping workers and families is going to preclude the expeditious economic recovery that the private sector is forecasting for Canada. The reality, Madam Speaker, because of the measures we're putting in place, we do expect to see jobs rebound beyond 1 million, and I expect that member will be disappointed when Canadians do so well.
Honour member for Carleton.
But he didn't answer the question. It was supposed to be this month that all those million Canadians would have their jobs back. He claims that there will be an expeditious recovery, another one of these subjective words that has no timeline, but his chart is very clear. It was supposed to be 1 million jobs by June 2021, and yet we're actually losing jobs. Down 250,000 in 2 months, second highest unemployment in the G7. Yes or no? Will the million Canadians have their jobs back?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the honourable member is trying to torque statistics to insert a narrative into this debate that simply is not borne out on the facts. We know that the economy is in a volatile position because we need to respond to the continuing public health emergency. But I have good news for the honourable member. If he could only convince his colleagues to get out of the way, stop obstructing the measures included in Budget 2021, so we can extend benefits to help businesses hire more workers, so we can support those who've lost their jobs and encourage more young people to take training opportunities, we will see the economy come roaring back. He doesn't have to believe me. He can look at the private sector economists that have testified to that.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Well, he needn't worry. I don't believe him, because I look at the chart in his government's budget, which says there'd be 1 million jobs back by this month. And now suddenly he's running away from that commitment. He's saying, don't worry, we've got really expensive debt-financed government programs. They're putting it all on the credit card. But he's running away from the central commitment to restore paychecks. Only paychecks will secure our future. So I will give him a third chance. Will he restate the government's commitment in Chart 35 of its budget that 1 million Canadians who lost their jobs during COVID will have them back this month?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Let me begin, Madam Speaker, by pointing out how disappointed I am that the honourable member takes such glee in the suffering of Canadians who've lost their job as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. If he's concerned about getting the paychecks back for Canadians who have been impacted negatively, I would point him to the measures that he is obstructing, like the Canada Hiring Recovery Incentive that is specifically designed to help more businesses get paychecks to Canadians. The reality is, Madam Speaker, we need to continue to support Canadians to stabilize the economy so we can absolutely crush the economic rebound and come roaring out of the pandemic recession as strong as any economy in the developed world.
L'honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Madam Speaker, Gary Kobinger from Laval University is an expert who is already celebrated for his discovery of a vaccine against Ebola and who at the beginning of the pandemic had developed a potential vaccine against COVID-19. But unfortunately, Ottawa denied him the funding he needed for clinical trials. Today, Canada still doesn't have domestic vaccine production capacity. It still doesn't have a modern pharmaceutical industry. And now it doesn't have Dr. Kopinger either. The University of Texas gave him one of the largest biomedical research labs in the world. Why didn't the government do everything possible to develop a local vaccine and keep this expertise in Quebec? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we have invested in research and science. In fact, that was one of the very first things we did when we saw COVID-19 approaching Canada's shores, was stimulate the research and science community by a massive investment of money to ensure that our scientists and researchers were equipped to study COVID-19, potential solutions to COVID-19, treatments, and yes, indeed, vaccines. We'll continue to work with the Canadian research community to ensure that we have domestic capacity for this pandemic and any future ones that arise.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Well, that's ridiculous, Madam Speaker. Quebec will be receiving 600,000 fewer doses of the Pfizer vaccine this week, but we'll be receiving more Moderna. And if we're still talking about these weekly deliveries, it's because Canada is still 100% dependent on foreign countries for our vaccine imports. Canada still doesn't have the necessary domestic production capacity, but at least it had the expertise. Now we've learned that we're losing one of our most eminent scientists because we're too cheap to fund his research. Why won't the government fund our scientists when we're still dependent on foreign pharmaceutical companies to whom we pay billions of dollars? The Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais...
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question, but I would remind him, Madam Speaker, that I spoke to Dr. Kopinger myself. We agreed on the next steps. I understand his personal decision, but we should remind all Quebecers that one of the companies that we did invest in was Medico in the city of Quebec, where we made significant investments to have domestic vaccine production for COVID-19. Madam Speaker, we have made investments, billions of dollars, to have a domestic vaccine. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. A young family that can't buy a house. A father who has to choose which day of the week his children will have a decent meal. François and Martin, who can't see each other because the cost of gas is too high for them to drive between the distance between them. These are the consequences of inflation. 3.6% is the highest inflation rate we've seen in 10 years. Liberals are putting Canadian families at risk. Why doesn't the Prime Minister have a plan to kickstart the economy and create jobs? The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, the honourable member's question rests on false pretenses and suffers from a deficit of morals. The reality is, as a matter of fact, the Bank of Canada, not the Government of Canada, is responsible for managing inflation. And in any event, if he would speak to an economist, they would tell him that the increase in prices on some products we're seeing are a result of the supply and demand in the marketplace or the base effects that stem from the massive plunge that we saw when the economy shut down to save lives. As a matter of morals, Madam Speaker, his solution is to pull supports from Canadians when they need it most. It is tasteless and short-sighted, and it's a good thing his party is not in charge.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
Moral lessons from this member, Madam Speaker. Ce qui est une menace.
If you want to know what's threatening us, well, interest rates that are so high. The $1 trillion in debt that this government has racked up. This Prime Minister's nonchalant attitude when he says that budgets balance themselves. The fact that Liberals are doing absolutely nothing to make life more affordable because they just want to tax, tax, tax. When will we see a credible plan to create jobs, Madam Speaker? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, with great respect, if the honourable member is concerned with getting supports to Canadians who are experiencing financial need as a result of the pandemic, he should get out of the way, stop obstructing the budget that includes supports that are going to help vulnerable Canadians, that's going to put more money in the pockets of affected workers, that's creating incentives for businesses to bring more workers back on the payroll and ensure people can keep a roof over their head and food on the table. The reality is, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have had their backs. The Conservatives have tried to obstruct every step of the way. We won't have it, and we will be there for Canadians no matter what it takes, as long as it takes.
Member for Regina Louvain.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And unfortunately, we were listening closely, and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance actually let it slip that these Liberals are going to crush the economic rebound. They're going to make sure it doesn't come back for sure. And we can see this absolutely in their approach to the oil and gas sector. Biden vetoed Keystone, and now Governor Whitmore's trying to make sure and shut down Line 5. So my question to the Parliamentary Secretary, to the Finance Minister is, did the Prime Minister even mention Line 5 at his G7 junket last week?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, Michigan's response to a routine step of this court process, we are strongly supporting Line 5. Canada's amicus brief clearly and directly expressed the government's legal position that Line 5 is an important and safe piece of infrastructure benefiting both Canada and the United States. Negotiated agreement that respects all parties is the best solution, and we're confident that the solution will be reached. Yes, we are behind Line 5. We have done all that we need to do to make sure that Line 5 continues to operate. We are behind the energy workers, and we will left no Canadians left in.
The member for Regina Louvain.
Oh, I believe that, Madam Speaker. They're so far behind the energy workers that no one can see where they're actually at, Madam Speaker. It's an embarrassment how this government's been treating our oil and gas sector. But one thing about Line 5 and what we should be talking about is, in fact, the treaty that was signed in 1977 to allow free flow of oil across our borders was actually ratified and voted on by then Delaware Senator, none other than Joe Biden. So the Prime Minister has such a great relationship with the President of the United States. I ask again, at their G7 summit, when they were maskless and visiting, did the Prime Minister bring up Line 5?
The Honourable Member for the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I encourage all members of office to actually read the amicus brief to understand the government of Canada's legal position on this issue. It's been endorsed by the Conservative government in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and as well as the government of Quebec, and by Sarnia's Mayor Mike Bradley. And industry, by labor, the Canadian Building Trades and Unifor. The 1977 Transit Pipeline Treaty remains in effect. The state of Michigan proposes measures present, but we are supporting our workers, we are supporting Line 5, and we will do everything that it takes to make.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Madam Speaker, ever since the Liberals announced a significant cut to the Canada Recovery Benefit in their budget, New Democrats have been pushing back against that cut and challenging the government to undo it. The answer they give in the House is completely disingenuous. They pretend there's a choice between voting for their budget and voting for the cuts, or voting against the budget and voting against extending the benefit. They know there's a third option, to extend the benefit and maintain the current benefit level. I'm just looking for some honesty here. Will the government acknowledge that that's an option and finally explain why they're choosing instead to cut the budgets of Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The CRB is part of a comprehensive suite of emergency and recovery measures to support Canadian workers and businesses. Through the CRB, if opposition parties support C30, Canadians could have access to up to 50 weeks of benefits. They could also have access to more flexible EI benefits. Businesses could continue to have access to the wage subsidy, and we could help Canadians re-enter the labour market by creating 500,000 new training and work opportunities and launching the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. We will continue to do whatever it takes, Madam Speaker, but we implore opposition parties to help us and put C30 through. Thank you.
Was the Honourable Minister, not the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
A scathing report from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International reviews that Canada jails thousands of people fleeing persecution, including those with disabilities. Many are held in maximum security provincial jails and put in solitary confinement without any charges or convictions. There is no legal limit to the length of immigration detention. Black and racialized people are often detained longer. CBSA officials can still put children in detention or separate them from their families, and there is no independent oversight for CBSA. This is happening in Canada under this Prime Minister's watch. Will the government stop this horrific practice?
The Honourable Minister.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Et d'abord, on tient à remercier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to say that we will read the report carefully, but there are some important things to keep in mind, that these provisions are for exceptional circumstances where a person represents a danger to the public, and it's a last resort. Or if a person's identity cannot be confirmed, or if they're unlikely to appear for their date. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic hits businesses across Canada hard. And now, as we move into recovery, it is crucial that we support communities through the reopening process. This is particularly important for Indigenous businesses, who often face barriers such as accessing capital or broadband internet. Madam Speaker, could the Minister please provide an update on current supports for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis businesses?
The Honourable Minister. Minister.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. On Wednesday, our government announced $117 million to renew the Indigenous Community Business Fund to support local business and economies. The first round of this initiative helped fund over 1,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis-owned businesses. We do recognize that Indigenous businesses, particularly community-owned micro-businesses, such as beaters and craft workers, face unique challenges due to their size and have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. This distinctions-based fund will relieve financial pressure for businesses, sustain jobs, and will keep doors open through the economic recovery.
Honourable Member Kildonan St. Paul.
Madam Speaker, Elder Eliza is a constituent of mine and a residential school survivor. Her and her daughter applied for their status cards and were promised it would take 6 months to review. It's now been nearly 3 years. Every time they call Indigenous Services Canada for an update, they're left on hold for hours and given the runaround time and time again, perhaps because the minister has only 10 people at the call center to process thousands of status card applications. Elder Eliza feels this delay is just another form of mistreatment and disrespect of Indigenous peoples. Will the minister ensure Elder Eliza and her daughter receive their status cards before the 3rd anniversary of their application on July 7th?
The Honourable Minister.
And thank the member for her question. I would ask her to forward that information to my office and to reach out, and we will do our utmost to expedite that process. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, asking her that she immediately address her department's discriminatory policy that's preventing some pregnant women who've lost their jobs because of the pandemic, no fault of their own, from claiming EI maternity benefits. Maternity leave is a sacred right of motherhood in Canada for millions of women. These women have paid into EI for years, and it is unfair that they will be forced back into the job market within weeks of giving birth. I have met with these women. They are real, they are stressed, and they need our help. The minister has the power to fix this. Why hasn't she?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, our government is very committed to supporting new mothers and parents who face unique challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic. We launched the CERB, which provided support to more than 8 million Canadians, introduced a credit of 480 hours to increase access to maternity and parental benefits, and set a minimum benefit rate of $500 a week. In Budget 2021, we're investing $3.9 billion into changes that will make EI more accessible and simpler for Canadians. This includes maintaining uniform access to EI benefits and a 420-hour entrance requirement for EI claims. We've had the backs of new mothers. I'm looking forward to conversations around modernizing EI. And
the Honourable Member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, the Defence Minister has been without honour from the start. First, he let the Prime Minister destroy Vice Admiral Norman. Then he falsely claimed he was the architect of Op Medusa. He took the honour out of the operation to combat sexual misconduct in the military. But now he's put the honor of our country at risk by claiming he didn't know about our soldiers being ordered to train war criminals when a report was sent 3 years ago about it. Why won't the Prime Minister do the honorable thing and fire this minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I am very disappointed at the viciousness of the tone in this House that we saw yesterday and today. Let's review the track record of service to Canada and Canadians of this Minister of National Defence. Over 2 decades of service in the Canadian Armed Forces, 4 tours of duty, including 3 in Afghanistan, for which he was awarded the Order of Military Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal, the NATO Service Medal, and more. over a decade as an officer in the Vancouver Police Department. I thank the Minister of Defence for his service. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Madam Speaker, when you as Speaker make a ruling, it is binding on this House. The Speaker is the lawful authority, and the Speaker's rulings carry force of law. Now, the Speaker has clearly ruled that any parliamentary committee has the right to send for unredacted documents. That ruling has force of law. So a simple question for the government. Will they follow the law, or do they think that they don't have to follow the law?
The honourable minister.
Madam Speaker, on this side of the House, we will never play games with national security. Canadians expect us to be mature and appropriate in the way that we treat documents of this nature. Let me quote Stephanie Carvin, Associate Professor of Carleton University. She said, "This bulldozer approach to national security is misguided, dangerous, and will result in a less transparent system overall." You know who last quoted her, Madam Speaker? The member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman just a few moments ago.
The honourable
member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Madam Speaker, on Wednesday, farmers had their federal assistance for quarantining temporary foreign workers cut in half. Ottawa was paying them $1,500 by way of apology for pinning the responsibility for quarantines on them. Now, the feds are cutting that to $750. But farmers are still taking on workers, and quarantines are still mandatory. The public health measures haven't changed. The costs haven't changed either. All that's changed is that Ottawa is no longer doing its part. Will the minister reverse this cut immediately? The honourable minister. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We work very closely with our Quebec counterparts on this and many other things. Over 4,000 temporary foreign workers have arrived in Canada for this season, including 1,400 and more to Quebec. The results speak for themselves. We are continuing to provide support for the arrival of these workers that farmers so badly need. The honourable member. Madam Speaker, when the minister announced this $1,500 assistance for worker quarantines, she gave her word to farmers. She said, quote, "This program will be available as long as the Quarantine Act is in force." Well, the quarantines are still a requirement, Madam Speaker. There's no logical reason for the funding to be cut in half. Will the minister keep her promise to farmers and stop the cuts as long as quarantines are mandatory? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Our government has doubled the number of temporary foreign workers in Quebec from 11,000 in 2015 to twice that now. And last year we received the largest number ever, and this year we will receive even more. And many skilled workers have been admitted. We are continuing to work with the Government of Quebec to support their economic recovery. Thank you.
Housing market is the latest victim of Liberal incompetence. Their first-time homebuyer program has only allocated $178 million since its creation. That's just 14% of its budget. The minister's program has only helped 9,800 applicants in 2 years. Madam Speaker, this is a national crisis affecting millions of Canadians with the highest price increase since 2006. When will the minister realize and admit that his program is not working?
The honourable minister.
Thank you very much for that question. I would point out to the Conservatives that every single measure we've put in place to fix the housing crisis in this country has been opposed by their party, including the measures to help first-time buyers access the homes of their choice. For example, the tax on vacant properties and offshore speculation, the disclosure requirements under beneficial ownership, the first-time home buyers plan itself, even the modifications to make more people qualified. Every single step of the way, the Conservatives say no, no, no. That leaves us with the status quo, a status quo they created. They are the problem, not our government. Our government has invested $72 billion in addressing the situation. Change is happening, and change will be.
Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
StatsCan released a new housing price index for May. New home prices have increased 11.3% year over year, and this is the largest increase since November 2006. Prices for lumber and other products increased 17.9% from the previous month. It's more than doubled year over year. Madam Speaker, can the Prime Minister explain why he's implemented such incredibly poor economic policies leading to increased inflation and higher home prices, effectively crushing the dreams of young Canadian families looking to buy their first home?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Unfortunately, we are not able to hear the Honourable Member. He needs to have his mic on.
I apologize, it double-clicked. The reality is this, is that our government is the first government in a generation to address the housing crisis in this country, not only from the question of affordable housing, but housing affordability. The investments we've made in the National Housing Strategy, now $72 billion, include supports to broaden the supports to rental housing market being built in this country, as well as creating clear access and bridges to home ownership if that's the choice that Canadians make. Inflation is presenting a serious challenge. We are working to make sure that we achieve on our housing goals because Canadians expect us to deliver on the right to housing, expect us to deliver a budget that supports this. The question is, why do the Conservatives oppose all these changes?
The Honourable Member for Provencher.
Madam Speaker, last week Conservatives brought forward a motion that called on this government to address Canada's housing affordability crisis. We laid out common sense solutions to help Canadians achieve their dreams of home ownership, but the Liberals voted against it. Today, Stats Canada is reporting the largest increase in new home prices in 15 years. Increasing inflation, out-of-control Liberal deficits are only exacerbating the situation. Why are the Liberals pushing home ownership further out of reach for young Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
I have to say that listening to the Conservatives talk about housing is really quite astonishing, considering they didn't do it the entire time they were in office. But I'll tell you this, the measures we're taking to create and sustain housing affordability are critically important to Canadians. But the pamphlet or the postcard they produced last week as a budget proposal, for example, to collapse the entire national housing strategy overnight, made no sense whatsoever. And when they said temporarily suspend ownership opportunities that I think are too generous for foreign offshore owners, they didn't even put a time limit on that. Is it a day, a month, a week? It was a pamphlet with slogans. I live in a province that's governed by a Conservative government that uses slogans. It doesn't work. You need real policies.
The Honourable Member for Markham-Stouffville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unlike the Harper Conservatives who defunded scientific inquiry, our government understands how essential it is to have a strong and resilient research and science ecosystem. Canadians are at the forefront of cutting-edge research into scientific issues. Would the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry update the House about recent investments that the government has made to help scientists conduct their research and spur innovation during this pandemic?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Markham-Stouffville for her excellent question on a very important issue. As she said earlier this week, I was proud to announce on behalf of Canadians an historic investment of over $635 million to foster a stronger and more vibrant research and science ecosystem in Canada. Through these investments, we have supported innovative, world-class research to better address and overcome some of the most pressing challenges. These investments, Madam Speaker, will create prosperity for all Canadians. Thank you.
Member for Oshawa.
Madam Speaker, Oshawa is home to Ontario Tech University, an institution designed to be a key economic driver in my community. A 2018 study found that 65% of software engineers and 30% of other STEM graduates leave Canada for opportunities abroad. The global tech race is on, and with the expiry of the American H-1B visa ban in March, American tech companies are free to again start poaching our youngest and brightest. Madam Speaker, when will Canadian students see a targeted plan to keep them and their futures in Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank the member for a very important question, Madam Speaker. We know that investment in science, technology, and innovation are crucial. We know that we need to invest more in trainings and make sure that the people have the skills. I would agree with the member. We need to do everything we can to retain our bright talent here in Canada, because we know that talent attracts investments. And that's why in the last budget we presented, Madam Speaker, there's a number of measures to make sure that Canada remains the most attractive place for talent around the world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Madam Speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister's misleading and blind partisan rhetoric over the last week is quite something. It was recently pointed out to me that their attitude is like that of an irresponsible student who only when faced with a deadline and possible failure in a class realizes their actions have consequences. But instead of taking responsibility, they are simply blaming others, blaming the system, and screaming it's simply not fair. Their condescending attitude abdicates the responsibility they have to serve Canadians. It's time to end the excuses and grow up. Will these Liberals take responsibility for their failures?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I find it bizarre the honourable member is pointing the finger on blind partisan arguments when he seems to ask a question without a real subject other than a generic allegation about the government's failures. Let me tell him about the government's work. We launched one of the most ambitious pandemic responses, both from a public health and economic point of view. We are leading the world when it comes to the number of Canadians who've received their first dose, and we have protected millions of Canadians' jobs. We have 9 million families keep food on the table and a roof over their heads with CERB. We've had about 5 million Canadians being kept on payroll as a result of the wage subsidy. We have a plan that's going to kickstart this recovery if only the Conservatives would
Member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
21 years ago, a little girl named Heather was playing in her front yard in Cloverdale. Her neighbor, 24-year-old violent pedophile Shane Ertmood, sexually assaulted and brutally murdered her, stuffed her in his hockey bag, and dumped her in the lake. Shane was sentenced to life in prison, and recently the parole board approved his early day release. Even though he admits that he continues to experience disturbing sexual urges, he plans to work in public parks, which are visited by many Victoria families. Will this government commit to review this release immediately and overturn the board's decision?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a very worrisome case the member raises. The parole board acts at arm's length according to established processes, but I will be interested in looking for more information about this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, my community in Brampton North was hit hard by COVID-19 earlier this year, and we've worked tirelessly to get cases down and vaccinations up. I'm proud to say that over 75% of adults in Peel region have received at least one dose, but we know there's more work to do and to make sure we're all protected from COVID-19. To the Minister of Health, what actions can Canadians take right now to help us all have a safer summer?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, to the member from Brampton North for her ongoing and continued advocacy for her constituents. Her work is tremendous, and I am so grateful to have her as a partner in that work. What Canadians can do is continue to show up to get vaccinated. You know, we are the #1 vaccinator in the G7, and that speaks to the hard work of the immunizers, but it also speaks to the willingness of Canadians to do the right thing and get vaccinated to protect themselves and their communities. And while we're getting that job done, Madam Speaker, let's continue to do the other things that we know that will keep ourselves safe. Follow our local public health measures, wear a mask, protect our community.
The Honourable Member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, recent policy changes to the Canada Summer Jobs Program are hurting university students who need that program the most. Employers have been told that the longest a single job can last is 8 weeks. Well, university students need at least 12 to 16 weeks to make enough money for next year's studies, and so they won't apply for these jobs. So will the minister bring back flexibility to the program so jobs can be created that meet the needs of both university students and employers? Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, we are very excited that this year we've offered more jobs through Canada Summer Jobs than ever before. Up to 150,000 opportunities are available. Madam Speaker, prior to project approvals, of course, the member opposite had the opportunity to provide feedback on all the recommended projects, and I encourage students to go to Job Bank and apply for a job, take advantage of this wonderful opportunity to contribute to your community and to get work experience as you head back into university in the fall.
The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox, Addington.
Madam Speaker, I've been troubled to see the suspension of Canadians' ability to travel domestically and internationally as guaranteed by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We've seen Manitoba close their borders, keeping one half of the country from the other. How many family vacations will be ruined by these measures? Just yesterday, CBC reported from an anonymous government source that a vaccine passport program will be implemented for travelers entering Canada soon. Why is the government at liberty to discuss with CBC something that has never been presented or debated in the House of Commons?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Speaker, you know what will inevitably ruin Canadians' vacation plans is any member of their family becoming sick with COVID-19. Every step of the way, we've relied on science and evidence to protect Canadians, to ensure that our communities are safe and increasingly free of COVID-19. We've done a great job together. It's really due to Canadians' hard work at protecting each other and the many sacrifices that they have made to do that. And I want to thank all Canadians for stepping up, because of a country that has COVID banished from our communities is the safest one. Thank you very much.